Let's take a peek at this. You can just see right away how juicy this is whenever you squeeze it. That is not a dry turkey. Have you ever cooked wild turkey and thought, this isn't great? You know that it could be better because it could be juicier, it could be more tender, but you don't know how to get that. I don't even know how many times I've heard people complain about turkey even at Thanksgiving, and I know a lot of hunters have this issue. So that's what I'm gonna break down today. We're gonna do 2 different cooking techniques. One is a perfect, no-fail, juicy pan-roasted turkey breast. And the other is a brined and smoked turkey leg that's gonna go into a hearty stew. So first, I wanna just talk a little bit about the differences between these 2 cuts of meat. Some people ask, what's the best way to roast a whole turkey at Thanksgiving? Because I know they want that big, beautiful presentation of a bird they shot on the table, but honestly, it's way better to break it down and cook it separately, particularly with the wild bird, because the legs can be incredibly tough. And especially the older the bird gets, the tougher it gets. So what you'll notice in these are 2 different birds. This was shot last fall by one of my friends, and it was a young Jake. And you can see the coloration of the meat is a lot more pale. It's gonna be really tender and awesome. These legs came from a mature tom, actually shot by the wild turkey doc. I had the honor of hunting with him last spring, and he shared with me his thighs and drumsticks, and they're so much darker colored. And you can see that just by looking at it, that it's more of a developed muscle. It's gonna be more flavorful, but a lot tougher. So I'm talking like, these could take 8 to 10 hours to cook, while this can only take 30 minutes. So why would you want to combine those together? You want to make the best of both worlds, and that's why I like to cook them separately. First, we're gonna get started with these legs because they take a lot longer to cook. We're gonna do this really lovely stew that I like in a crock pot. It's a 1-pot meal that's really flavorful, that's got a lot of aromatics, your basics in the mirepoix. You've got carrots, onion, and celery. I have 1 straggling leek that I'm gonna use up. And of course, lots of garlic. So this is one of those recipes that's great for a cold, rainy day, a cold, snowy winter day, because it's just so hearty. It's got all these vegetables in it. It's got the turkey that's gonna be smoked to infuse this flavor, and then it's got beans in it. So it's pretty thick. So I've learned that one of the most important things you can do before you even start cooking is to utilize the power of a brine. I always say that salt is the most important ingredient in your pantry, and that's because salt can interact with the protein structure to increase its water holding capacity. Whenever you go to cook it, less moisture is lost. So the way that I kind of like to think of it is that it's basically an insurance in case you do overcook it. This particular brine is a traditional wet brine. So when making a traditional wet brine, you want to make sure that the solution is evenly mixed. So you don't want to just put salt and sugar straight into cold water. You need to heat that up so that it can dissolve into the water. And then I'll add the rest of it in ice water so that it chills it really fast, because you don't want to put the turkey legs in warm liquid. So it only needs to go for 24 hours in the brine, and then I pull it out, give it a quick little rinse, pat it dry, and then I've let it air dry for another 24 hours on this grid so that it gets some airflow. And the helpful thing about drying it out is it kind of creates more of a tacky surface, so that the smoke can adhere to the meat a little bit better. Generally, I like to leave that silver skin on there because it's got a lot of collagen in it, and when that breaks down in slow cooking, it dissolves and it adds the succulence to the meat in a way that it makes up for the fat that it lacks. All right, these are ready to smoke, and they're gonna go on at about 200 to 225 degrees for only 2 hours. So the whole point of this is infusing it with smoke flavor. We're not trying to cook it all the way through. This is gonna take hours to tenderize. So if you think you're gonna put a drumstick on the smoker and then like take it off and like eat it like a caveman at a state fair, that's not gonna happen. And if you try to smoke it until it's all the way tender on the smoker, it's gonna be so dry that it tastes like shoe leather. So just 2 hours, guys. All right, let's get started on this turkey breast. Arguably the best part of a wild turkey. I like to break even this breast down into different pieces. Even within a breast meat of a turkey, there's a pretty big variability in the thickness of the meat. But what you'll notice at the top part of this breast, it's about a couple inches thick here, and then as it tapers down towards the bottom, it gets really thin. So if you were to just like slap this on the skillet, this is gonna be overcooked by the time this part is fully cooked. So I like to, personal preference, take a knife and cut it right where it starts to thin out into this lower lobe here. And so I'm gonna cut it into 2 pieces. And for the recipe today, I'm only gonna cook this top portion. That's really just this nice shape that makes a beautiful presentation when you're serving people. All right, so this guy, we'll save him for later. Now for this piece, just like with the turkey legs, I think the most important part is salting it first. And so unlike the turkey legs where we did a submerge into a liquid brine, I'm doing what I call a dry brine. Unlike the wet brine, this is not going to be able to absorb more liquid because it's not sitting in liquid, but it is going to enable it to retain more juices whenever it's cooked. So basically, I'm going to season this with enough salt so that it coats the meat a little bit more than what you would typically season before you cook. And I'm not gonna rinse this off with water, so don't put so much salt on it that it's just too salty, but you need enough on there that it's gonna do the job. And then today it's really simple with salt and pepper because I'm gonna make a white wine tarragon pan sauce that's gonna coat the top of it, and I really want the turkey meat itself to shine and that sauce to just sort of be a lovely complement. And ideally, if you could do this 24 hours in advance in the refrigerator, cover it with plastic or something, that is kind of the perfect time length to sort of dry brine it. But even a few hours makes a huge difference. Okay, so we're gonna put one of these legs into this pot, and I'm not doing a ton because this is very intensely smoky, very salty. It's almost more of a condiment. So think of just like a good pot of beans with some bacon or a ham hock. It's sort of that same philosophy. So I'm gonna add beans, and these are obviously dried straight from the pantry. I didn't bother soaking them because this is gonna take like 4 or 5 hours at least to cook. And then we're gonna cover this with lots of stock. So I'm doing chicken stock. Ideally, you want to do unsalted stock, just because this meat's already really salty, and you can always add more salt, but you can't take it out. So because I have salted stock, I'm only going to do half of it with that, and then do the other half with water. There we go. And that's it. All right, I'm gonna put this on a low setting, and I'm gonna guess it's gonna take 4 to 6 hours, but again, depending on the age or maturity of your turkey, it may take longer. I've once had a turkey take almost 10 hours to tenderize, and I just think it's a way of getting the last laugh. So if it's still tough after you check it 4 hours later, just let it keep doing its thing and it'll eventually tenderize. So for the rest of these legs, I'm actually gonna vac seal them separately and freeze them for cooking later on in the year. These are really great to drop into a tortilla soup or smoked turkey, like chicken noodle soup with smoked turkey. A lot of different ways that you can utilize these, but really it's just packed with so much flavor, so it'll be great to use later down the road. All right, so this has been dry brining in the fridge. I'm gonna let this sit out for a few minutes before I pan roast it and get the rest of the ingredients ready for this sauce. So this is a sauce that is in my cookbook, and it comes together really quickly in the same pan that you actually cook the dish in, and it's just a really light and refreshing way to serve on top of turkey. It's got white wine, butter, garlic, a little stock, and some tarragon. And it's kind of got a little bit of this licorice anise flavor that I've really come to love. It's just really refreshing. When I make sauces, for me, it's really sort of a ratio and combination of first you've got aromatics, then you've got some form of liquid. Usually it's a stock, something, if you're serving something savory, you want that savory flavor coming through, and then you want something acidic, so you just have like a little splash of wine or liquor, or maybe it's just vinegar or lemon juice, something to make it really pop. So if the first step to not drying out your meat is to brine it, I would say the second step is not to overcook it. So this technique is going to be fail-proof, so easy, juicy every time. And to start, you're gonna take some paper towels and you're gonna pat this breast really dry. You may have noticed that some of the salt brought a little bit of moisture out since it's been sitting on it for a while. So make sure it's really, really, really dry. Okay. And then we're gonna come on over to our range and we're gonna pan roast this. So pan roasting essentially means starting from the pan and going straight into the oven. The oven is set at 250 degrees, so it's a relatively low temperature, and that low temperature kind of helps the meat to stay juicy. Higher temperature tends to dry it out. So we're gonna start with a pretty high heat on the skillet, and the purpose of this is just to sear it and brown the outside. And then when we transfer it to the oven, it's gonna cook a lot slower and more evenly. Chicken schmaltz. Chicken schmaltz is fat from a chicken that's been rendered, and so that's gonna be the cooking medium for this turkey. If you don't have chicken schmaltz at home, which you probably don't because it's kind of hard to track down, you can just use ghee, which is clarified butter, or a neutral flavored oil with a high smoke point like avocado or grapeseed. Maybe a little more. So this pan's pretty hot, and we're gonna lay this flat down. The turkey will let you know when a crust is developed because it should lift freely from the pan. So if you start going like this and you're like, oh no, it's stuck, don't panic, just leave it there, let it do its thing. All right, let's see. There we go. That's the coloration you're going for. All this beautiful edges is really nice and pretty. I've got a metal baking grid, and that's gonna go set inside of a little sheet tray. And the reason that I like that is because this allows a little bit of airflow to go underneath the turkey, and it'll help to cook evenly. See how nice and gold it is on both sides. All right. But it's still very raw in the middle. So what we're gonna do, and this is the part that makes it just foolproof, is we're gonna use an oven thermometer so that we know exactly what temperature it is in the center as it cooks. So you're gonna insert this at the thickest part. All right, so right now internally it's only 72 degrees. We're gonna insert this in the oven that's already preheated and let it do its thing. This is finished, it looks beautiful. And then we're gonna put this pan sauce together. So all we're trying to do here is sort of bloom the garlic. I usually like to say in my recipes to only cook it until it's fragrant. I don't want to toast the garlic or burn the garlic. And then to stop that cooking process, I'm going to go ahead and add about 1/4 to 1/2 cup of white wine. All right, so now you can use that to scrape up all the brown bits at the bottom of the pan that are really flavorful. We're gonna let it boil that alcohol off and sort of reduce for a minute and keep this on high heat because we wanna work kind of fast. And then I'll add the pheasant stock, which at home you could just use chicken stock or turkey stock if you have homemade turkey stock. And then we're gonna let this boil and reduce about in half. I'm gonna turn this down and we're gonna add the butter. We're gonna shake it to emulsify it. That's good. Now I'm just gonna finish with a little bit of that tarragon to make it pop. And we're done. All right, now we are at the very end. Just need to slice this up for serving. You can just see right away how juicy this is whenever you squeeze it. That is not a dry turkey. That is a good turkey. So tender. So whenever I serve this, I usually like to just plate it on a platter, scoop up meat, and then we're gonna spoon this sauce across the top. So even though this turkey is delicious as it is, like it really doesn't even need sauce at all, but the sauce is pretty amazing. So it's great to serve it with this sauce. If it's in the spring, I love just a simple roasted asparagus. Obviously any kind of potato would be fantastic with this. Really anything that you want to serve, it's just kind of a really show-stopping piece. So the side dishes, just something real simple. So as you can see, this is like incredibly juicy, and I think a lot of people have issues cooking with wild game because they're comparing it to domestic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's just doomed. If you just follow these like couple little tips of a brine or just simply not overcooking, it can make a life-changing difference in how great wild turkey can really be. So the next time you have wild turkey and you don't want it to be tough and you don't want it to be dry, try both of these recipes from my cookbook, pan-roasted wild turkey with the tarragon pan sauce, or maybe smoke the legs, drop that in a crock pot with a bunch of veggies and beans for a really hearty stew.